It started like a dressing room whisper that turned into a national headline. Reports said John Terry had an intimate link with the partner of his England teammate, Wayne Bridge. The word alleged mattered in courtrooms, but in pubs and message boards, it didn't stop the outrage. The fallout was immediate and ugly. Teammates split into camps, training ground tension leaked into TV cameras, and Bridge refused to shake Terry's hand in public matches. That silent snub became a viral moment. England reacted with fast, public moves. Terry lost the England captaincy. Managers and FA officials felt forced to act because the brand of the national team was on the line. The headlines never relaxed. Reputation, once earned on the pitch, was now a political argument. Captain, leader, legend, homewrecker. The line stuck because it landed hard. People still type those words when Terry's name pops up. It's a short, savage punchline that tells you the whole story without the preface. Joey Barton made trouble look like a full-time job. Training ground fights, random pub rows, and a reputation for volatility followed him from club to club. Fans joked he'd start his own brand of red cards if the FA let him. The noise never stopped. The incidents were not just loud, they got physical and legal. Reports included stubbing a cigar in a youth player's eye and other violent acts that led to court dates. Discipline records filled up faster than appearances. Each headline added weight to the story of a player who could not be tamed. Justice eventually caught up. Barton served jail time for assault, a rare fall from the professional game into a cell. The sport can forgive on-field madness, but it treats criminal convictions differently. Clubs moved cautiously after the court rulings. Barton wasn't a midfielder, he was a walking crime scene. That line lands because it's accurate in the harshest way. You could watch his highlights and expect brilliance, then watch the news and find another example of how he'd lost the plot. This one read like an espionage drama, with hotel lobbies and secret meetings. Chelsea wanted Ashley Cole while he was still Arsenal's best left back. The rule was simple. You don't approach a contracted player directly. The meeting changed that rule into a headline. Evidence stacked fast. Cole, his agent and Chelsea executives met in a London hotel while he was an Arsenal player. The Premier League opened an investigation because the rules were clear, and the photo trail was not. Fines followed like punctuation marks at the end of a bad paragraph. Punishments were handed down. Cole was fined £100,000, Chelsea was hit with £300,000, and Mourinho was fined £200,000. The numbers were big then, they look smaller now, but the stain stayed. A one-time image of a secret meeting outlived the official penalties. Cole still moved a year later and won trophies with Chelsea. From a career view, the transfer worked. From a moral and fan angle, it turned Cole into a villain to Arsenal fans. That split shows how football rewards results even while it punishes the story. One straight line can ruin a week. Rio Ferdinand missed a routine drug test in 2003, and the clock began ticking. The FA viewed it as a serious breach. So did his club. Manchester United were furious. An 8-month ban followed, and careers hung in the balance. The timing hit hard because it came at a peak in Rio's best years. Missing the test became a public trust issue, not just a paperwork error. Rio kept saying he forgot, a phrase that never aged well in newspapers. Forgetting a drug test at the elite level looks less like human error and more like a career risk. Try telling your boss you forgot to show up to work for a drug test. The image is stark because elite sport has a different threshold for mistakes. One slip can change what you can say in press rooms for years. Harry Redknapp turned a finance headline into a courtroom drama. Accusations of tax evasion via Monaco accounts painted a manager into a legal corner. The case grabbed attention because it mixed money, secrecy, and a well-known public face. The trial dug into odd corners. Reporters noted Harry's lack of digital skills, and the claim that he could not write or use email fed the story machine. It made him human in a way that undercut the legal narrative and made the courtroom feel strangely domestic. He walked out without conviction. Acquitted, but not untouched. The public still filed the story under questions. The cloud of suspicion lingered because trials rarely erase headlines. Reputation takes hits that courts do not always repair. Rooney's life looked like a highlight reel until the off-field headlines stacked up. Allegations of escorts and nightlife stories followed him while he was married and famous. The personal and public are mixed into a messy timeline. Fans reacted in waves, and a lot of them booed after England's 2010 exit. The pitch and the stands became a referendum on character, not just ability. But Rooney kept producing top-level performances. He scored huge goals while the rumours echoed. That contradiction made him a complicated figure. You could watch a clinical striker and then flip channels to a scandal segment. The contrast was jarring. Clubs and sponsors learned that performance and image are separate ledgers. This one read like a contract horror. Third-party ownership meant players were not owned by a single club. Tevez and Mascherano arrived at West Ham with tangled paper trails. Fans saw the players. Administrators saw a rules problem. The Premier League banned that model for clear reasons. West Ham broke the rule in 2006, and the case exploded into fines and legal rows. The club paid money and lived with the fallout. The pitch result that season had consequences that reached into the next year. Sheffield United were relegated, and a long row about compensation and fairness followed. West Ham were fined roughly £5.5 million for the breach, and accusations of unfair advantage stuck to the club for years. Numbers and paperwork had real season effects. A pre-season tour turned into a PR disaster. Leicester players got filmed in acts that were racist and offensive while they were abroad. The footage and the response destroyed careers overnight. 3 players were sacked, and the club moved hard to contain the damage. The manager, Nigel Pearson, saw his position wobble and then fall in the weeks after. A short trip to Thailand became a chain of career endings and headlines. The club tried damage control. Staff changes and sackings followed, but the larger damage was trust. Fans, sponsors, and other players watched a team unspool in public. Recovery was slow and hard. They went for team bonding. They came back unemployed. The bluntness of that line shows how quickly a team can trade a pre-season laugh for a career crisis. Ryan Giggs had a long run at Manchester United and a private life he fought to hide. Reports later said he had an affair with his brother's wife for years. The story carried a layer that tabloids love: betrayal inside a famous family. Giggs secured a gagging order to stop publication, but the secrecy failed when people outside the legal bubble talked or when courts moved. The legal attempt to hide the story collapsed in public view. Once the veil tore, headlines poured in. The damage was not just personal, it became a public saga that touched sponsors, the club, and the national image of a neat career. Silence disappeared, and an icon's fame shifted into a cautionary tale. The public's appetite for scandal turned this into a long memory. He ran more in secret hotel rooms than on the left wing. That barb lands because it flips a football metric into a human story. People remember the line because it makes the point with dark humor and a sting. I know you've got an opinion already. Don't just yell at the screen. Put it in the comments. And while you're at it, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. It blew up because he flat refused to go on. City were mid-season and Tevez would not come off the bench. That simple act felt like mutiny in a sky blue shirt. He then flew back to Argentina, not to patch things up, to play golf. That image did everything for the story. A top pro choosing tees over tactical talks. The club and manager went into damage control. Papers wrote about loyalty and contracts. Fans argued online like it were a transfer war. Tevez came back and scored. City still lifted a title around that era. The whole saga read like a soap opera where the lead actor skipped rehearsal to hit a hole-in-one. Only Tevez could go on strike, play golf, and still get a medal. It started with an arrest that stunned a club and a town. The police moved fast, and the story became tabloid lead after tabloid lead. Sunderland staff and fans were left holding questions. At first, the club backed him publicly. They treated him as a player under investigation. The moment the evidence hardened, the tone changed. That shift was brutal to watch. The court heard the case, and the verdict ended a career. The player was found guilty and sent to prison. For a player once cheered in the stands, this was a hard, irreversible fall. Sunderland survived the season, but the stain did not leave the club. The phrase that follows the case is simple and cold. This is one of the darkest stains in modern Premier League history. It was the day football briefly became a martial arts film. Cantona was sent off after a foul. He walked to the tunnel and then exploded. A fan had shouted abuse. Cantona vaulted advertising hoardings and launched a karate kick. The image was on every screen. Slow motion made it feel cinematic. The FA moved fast. They banned him for 9 months and ordered community service. But the punishment was heavy and public. United lost ground that season without him. He missed big games and the title race shifted. Yet the story never killed his myth. People argued about character and context for years. Cantona left the stadium with a new kind of legend. He was the only player you could say both hurt a fan and then helped turn his club into a dynasty. The story began with a leak that felt like a spy movie. Documents suggested sponsorship deals were inflated to hide owner funding. The papers landed on desks, and the noise rose. UEFA moved in and eventually acted. A ban was handed down, then reversed on appeal in 2020. The back and forth made the whole thing messy and slow. Fans watched seasons pass while the case dragged on. The Premier League later opened related probes. Charges and counters followed, legal teams billed by the hour, and the saga turned into courtroom theatre. City said they were surprised. The line landed because it sounded like a headline trying to breathe. The truth stayed in filings and in long statements with no drama. It started with a late equaliser and a scar on a defender. Suarez bit Branislav Ivanovic in an Anfield match in 2013, and the image horrified people. The FA gave a long ban, and the debates exploded. This was not a one-off. Suarez had a prior racism row with Patrice Evra that already stained his reputation. Then, at the World Cup, he bit Giorgio Chiellini. It became a pattern no club loved to explain. Punishments came from associations and from fans. Clubs had to balance talent and damage control. Sponsors and kit deals watched these stories like hawks. This was a theatre with two stubborn leads. Mourinho arrived in the Premier League and instantly rewired rivalries. He baited Wenger. The words got personal fast. Mourinho's famous specialist in failure line was brutal. It was supposed to sting, and it did. The press loved it, and the fans owned it. Managers trade barbs. This was next level. The rivalry boiled over into touchline moments. There was a famous shove between the two that made headlines for days. Cameras caught what managers usually hide behind a smile. They both left reputations shifted. One became the master provocateur, the other absorbed the hits and pushed back. The feud was a long-term ratings bump for anyone covering it. It was a match-day clip that blew up. Eva Carneiro ran onto the pitch to treat players, and the manager publicly attacked her decision. The reaction was instant and ugly. Mourinho questioned her judgment in a way that felt personal. The club then had to manage a player medical staff crisis. Fans watched a team implode for reasons beyond form or tactics. Carneiro left, and she later took legal action. The fallout cost the club image points and created a locker room tension that is hard to measure in stats. Managers can bark at players. Publicly humiliating your doctor looks different. Chelsea lost a doctor and something of their authority in one messy week. It raised questions about leadership and about what lines are safe to cross in front of cameras. It began as a holiday story that went very wrong. Maguire was arrested after a street incident in Mykonos, and the news landed in the transfer windows and the tabloids. The Greek police charged him, and the legal wheels spun. He faced convictions that he later appealed. The optics were terrible for a player who had just been handed a big responsibility at Manchester United. On the pitch, his authority never looked the same. Social feeds filled with jokes that cut deeper than laughter. Fans and pundits used the incident as shorthand for decline. Defending for England became a different conversation. The line that followed the case was brutal and short. England's defender could not even defend himself in Mykonos. It started with a reporter in disguise and a series of secret recordings. Sven thought private chats would stay private. The fake shake tapes said otherwise. The footage suggested he might leave England for a smaller job if the price was right. The idea that the national manager could be negotiated away became a huge embarrassment. The headlines had fun with the image. This was not about tactics. It was about trust and character and the idea of selling out. The papers pounced, and the public's enjoyment of the scandal surprised everyone. Only Sven could downgrade from England to Villa in one phone call. It began with a training room grudge that spilled onto a match day. Bowyer and Dyer argued and then exploded during a game. Two teammates throwing punches is the sort of thing you stop and rewind. The fight left the club short on the pitch and embarrassed in front of the cameras. Shearer, who watched it all, had to step in and defuse a scene that felt utterly ridiculous. The FA fined and suspended both players. The club held a press conference and the players apologised. The damage was partly financial and partly reputational. When your own squad fights itself, the season gets complicated fast. When midfielders tackle each other, you know a team has lost the plot. It started with a heated exchange and then an accusation. Mikel said a match official used racist language. The claim shook English football and reignited old debates. An investigation followed, and the official was cleared. Even though the clearing did not settle the argument, the case showed how fragile trust can be. Chelsea felt the blow in public perception. The FA had to explain procedures while people demanded clearer action. The whole saga exposed weaknesses in how serious claims are handled. Chelsea versus refs became a storyline that outshone the scoreboard, as the heat between the club and officials was more dramatic than many matches that season. It was not a scandal like a court case. It was a tragedy that raised questions. A helicopter carrying the club owner crashed after a match, and the world paused. Investigations followed. They looked at maintenance, procedures, and safety checks. The reports were detailed and technical, not dramatic. Still, some voices said warnings were ignored. Those hints never turned into a criminal file. The secrecy and the grief kept many of the questions from settling. When families and fans look for answers, they expect clear truths. Some never arrived, a tragedy so heavy that even broadcasters avoided the deepest digging. The silence became part of the story that no one wanted, but everyone noticed. It began with a leaked clip that made people stop and rewind. Coote was seen in video footage making disparaging remarks about a top manager. The PGMOL then suspended him pending an inquiry. Days later, a separate clip surfaced that looked worse. It appeared to show him using white powder while on duty at a major tournament, and UEFA opened a probe. The two videos together pushed the case into full public view. PGMOL moved from suspension to dismissal after its internal review. Reports said the organisation found his position untenable and he was sacked. Coote later apologised and said personal struggles helped explain his actions. UEFA banned him from officiating activity for a period, and the FA continued separate proceedings. The fallout was wide. It was not just about words on a sofa. It became a full-scale reckoning for an official who had steered top matches. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.